And hello and welcome to another recording of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. We are back with more news, tech content and wisdom from the world of marketing. Joining me, I'm on a mission to keep marketing simple, the voice of the Marketing and Finance Podcast and the author of Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans. I give you Monsieur Roger Edwards.
Oh, thank you so much. And of course, I'm also joined by a man who is also on a mission to demystify digital marketing. He is the host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast. Please welcome Monsieur Pascal Fintoni.
Thank you very much. This is episode 66, Roger. I'm sure there's a special name if you play bingo. I don't know it. Perhaps you do.
No, I don't actually. I think the only bingo name that I know is Legs 11, and it's definitely not that.
Yeah. So if you do know what it's called in a bingo hall, let us know. But the other thing that you can do for Roger and I is let us know about your plans for this year. We'll be working on the next few episodes. We do plan around themes. We try and look at ways in which we can make your life easier as a marketer and content marketer. So let us know about strategies and some aspects of strategies you'd like us to investigate for you. What about content creation? What are your new goals for this year? And leave those messages in the socials and we'll do what we can to include those as part of our mini segment, Content Spotlight, the news, the tech, and so on. Film marketing is also a very important segment for this show, and we have a very special selection, are we not, Roger?
Oh my goodness, Minority Report, Pascal. And as always, I watched it last night. What an amazing film. Probably not seen it for a good 10 years or so, maybe even more. And not only can we talk about the marketing of the film, which we will do, but this is a film which has a thread about marketing going through it. It predicted where we might be in the future, and of course the future's now.
And I don't predetermine, how successful this episode will be, but this may be one of the best inclusion in film marketing because of what you just said a moment ago. Very quickly, we love to give shout-outs, but receiving them is also very, very nice indeed. And recently, on LinkedIn in particular and Twitter, we got some messages from Andy Storch, from Art Markman, Mark Wilson, and also you got a shout-out from DrawKit, one of the apps that you selected for episode 64, which was lovely. And we also made the list of the 15 best tech podcast. Dr. Claire Trevian selected us as part of ISO Line Communication. The outtakes video is still doing the rounds 2-3 weeks later. I'm not thinking that we should be worried about the outtakes doing better than some of the episodes we published, but we've got some lovely messages from Nicola Osborne, Ima Duffy, Nico Jones, Gemma Walton, Beth Hewitt, also people from Umi, Claude Kelly, Nick Clark, Ross Hodgson, and so on, Bethan Wright also, as well as Simon Clayton, and many, many more. Well, listen, that was the whole point. If we can kind of make you smile and brighten your day, that's what we do. Now, Roger, let's begin with In the News.
A recent report from Monster.com confirms that digital skills shortages remains a major issue, with nearly 90% of companies having trouble finding candidates with the necessary digital skills.
While Meta is working on establishing ethical boundaries for the creation and use of virtual influencers in the Metaverse to help people understand when information is not coming from an actual person.
According to marketingdive.com, QR codes are back and here to stay. Once dismissed as gimmicky, advertisers are now embracing the black and white labels across all media, including TV screens and interactive displays.
Well, Swiss software company Logitech has launched the next chapter of their Defy Logic TV campaign by teaming up with pop superstars Lizzo to position Logitech as a hip tech brand for young creators.
The European Parliament approved the draft of the Digital Services Act, which will prevent platforms to use targeted ads, collect personal data without permission, and publish illegal content, including hate speech or counterfeit goods.
Visit Essex is launching a £300,000 TV campaign in an attempt to shed its lowbrow reputation, often encouraged by popular TV shows such as The Only Way is Essex.
Universal Pictures and NBC Sports have produced a series of adverts featuring 3 US Olympic athletes being chased by dinosaurs in a surprising crossover to promote the film Jurassic World Dominion.
And finally, Google has introduced a new Easter egg, Roger. If you search the game Wordle, the Google logo will switch to a row from Wordle and the latest change as if someone is playing the incredibly popular game. Wow, another set of eclectic news. But let me just quickly ask you, are you playing Wordle at the moment, Roger?
I'm not, Pascal, and I'm aware of it. I mean,
Mhm.
who couldn't be aware of it? Pretty much every Twitter tweet that I see these days is about Wordle. But I have so far resisted the temptation to give it a try, not because I'm not curious, but because it seems to suck people in, and they then, after that, spend their entire lives playing it. So I've decided to give it a miss for a while.
I mean, certainly I played the French version. I thought I should practice some of my French. And it's very addictive. It also makes you realize how competitive and what an incredibly sore loser I am as well. So I've had to have a break because it's just a source of stress for me more than anything else, being, kind of outperformed by my younger sister and so on. But very quickly, let's talk about two things. I think I can combine them. Meta, looking at establishing ethical boundaries by letting people know when a video particularly or an image is from a virtual character, shall we say. And then we talked about this, the draft bill of the Digital Services Act, which will essentially punish platform for doing things like targeting ads, collecting data, and also including kind of misinformation. It feels like, a massive kind of house cleaning job that's going to happen this year.
Yes, it does, and there's a certain irony, isn't there, that Meta are working on establishing ethical boundaries when they've probably been accused quite prolifically in the past of almost abusing their data privileges. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt, and let's see how they tidy that up. Again, we're immediately talking about this thing called the Metaverse, which is one of the great big buzzwords of 2022 already, and of course, as you said in a news item last week, the vast majority of the man and women on the street don't even know what the metaverse is, and even if they do, they're not really interested in it. So it's going to be a long time before it becomes mainstream. Undoubtedly, it will become mainstream. I think we all know that, but I suppose that for that reason, it's a good idea to get in early and establish these boundaries so that when we do start using it a lot, it's not getting abused.
I mean, in fairness, the reactions have been in two ways. One, I've said it's about bloody time, excuse my French, but also can you not extend the ethical boundaries to all your products, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, and so on, what just, the metaverse? And then the other, this idea of in the future, a company could decide to create a video and they would love for the CEO to give, the message, but they can't get access to him or her. So what they're going to do is literally write the script, and there will be a program that would allow, using deepfake really, would allow the CEO to be seen and heard delivering the speech, even though they never did. And I'm just not sure how I feel about it, and we shall see. One that I think would work is if you create an avatar that is almost your alter ego, is almost like, the other side of your personality, almost like a companion or a sidekick. So it's clearly not you. It never will be you. And this character can express things a bit differently, could be a bit more controversial, a bit more humorous. And I can see that working well. But to literally create fake content without telling people, I'm just struggling with the rationale behind that.
And I think one of the reasons why social media in particular is so polarizing is that anonymity that it can give you. You can invent a Twitter profile. It doesn't have to be Roger Edwards or Pascal. It can be, the Scarlet Avenger or whatever you want to call yourself. And that anonymity has been abused by a lot of people. They can be bullies. They can be trolls, I guess, and we've all been victims of trolls. And I don't really want to see that coming into the next iteration of the internet. And hopefully, this will create some sort of check against that, I guess.
On the subject of having a virtual version of yourself and so on and so forth, when I was looking at the reaction to Two Geeks on LinkedIn, I kind of spotted your profile, and I apologize, Georgia, I don't look at your profile on LinkedIn very often, but I did notice that there's a new bit of information against your name, Roger. There is a little qualifier that reads, "not a robot."
Yes, I suppose I was being a bit flippant there. That's actually the bit that you can change to say whether your personal pronouns are he, her, they, it, whatever you want. But it is actually a free-form box, so you can put whatever you want in there. And I think I put Not a Robot in to coincide with a specific day of the year, probably halfway through last year, and I've just forgotten to change it back.
That's all right. I just realized that you can actually make me laugh without being present. That's quite amusing. So at the time of recording this podcast, Roger, we are actually on the 28th of January, which is actually International Data Privacy Day. And I thought it was very, very appropriate for us to choose some of those news. I'm going to resist temptation to talk about Jurassic World Dominion and whether or not we want to see the athletes being eaten by a T-Rex. But I want to talk to you about brands trying to position themselves differently. Logitech targeting hip tech creators, and Visit Essex, who wants to attract tourism, really, because they claim, and I'm probably rightly so, that they have a strong heritage, historical heritage, and people should know about it as much as everything else. Now, I will confess, for me, Logitech feels like old tech. I used to know Logitech back in the days of being a young marketing assistant. It's just fascinating. If you watch the advert, it's really, really good, and how they're positioning it. And we need to wait and see how Visit Essex will create their adverts as well.
Yeah, I mean, collaborations are proven to work, aren't they? I mean, crikey, when we get to talk about Minority Report, we're going to be talking about product placement in there. And I think that if you have got a brand, which, as you said, Logitech is an old brand, maybe there are people out there who aren't aware of it, but collaborating with something more modern, more fresh, like a pop star, is likely to attract a different audience. So yeah, it's a good way to revitalize a brand, is to collaborate with somebody else.
Super. So thanks very much for helping me review the news that kind of hit our virtual desk. But let's slow things down with the content spotlights.
Yeah.
So in this section of the show, we surprise each other with a discovery from the interweb, a podcast, a video, an article, something that can really help us reflect what it means to be a marketer in today's economy. So Roger, what have you got for us today?
Well, this week, Pascal, I was conscious of the fact that we were going to be talking about Minority Report and all the marketing issues that raises. So I was guided towards this article, which again talks about this thing called the Metaverse, which we've already mentioned today on the show in the news section. The title of this article, which appears in on the Inc. website, is 4 Innovations That Give a Sneak Peek into the Metaverse. So effectively what they're saying is new patents are being granted to Meta, that's the Facebook holding company, which could make the Metaverse, whenever it becomes mainstream, incredibly realistic. Again, it's a very short article by Gabriel Bianez, and it's really interesting to look at some of the things they're talking about. And then later, when we get to talk about the Minority Report film, you'll be thinking, crikey, some of the things that film predicted are actually here being patented now. It's really, really interesting. So the 4 things, and I'll just go through them very quickly, is the first patent is giving people the ability to actually manipulate objects in that virtual reality setting. So I don't know whether you'll have to actually wear a specific type of glove with sensors on it or something, but you will actually be able to pick up, touch, pinch, squeeze, knead, whatever you do, you can use this technology to interact with objects within the metaverse, which, that's pretty incredible. Another one is to help you create a much more realistic avatar. Now, I've seen some of the photographs and some of the visualizations of test metaverses, and they still look like Second Life, which was about 2 decades ago, when in the early version of the internet, and that looked like a really poor sort of Duke Nukem type graphical video game type approach. But they've got this technology now here which can really simulate pretty much everything that happens on the body. So how your wrinkles change when you smile, for example, or even how the weave of your jacket or your shirt or whatever it might be, how that changes as your body moves and how the textures move. I mean, it's incredible detail, but of course it brings us closer to something a little bit more lifelike. Another one, the third one, the patent focuses on something called spectator images that would allow you to invite someone to share your view of something. So I'm thinking about a game that I play, which is called Planet Coaster, which is where you build a theme park, and there's all these little people come into the theme park and start riding on the rides that you've built and eating from your shops and buying things and things like that. And what you can actually do, if you want, you can click on one of those little people and you can actually then wander around the park as them, so you'll see through their virtual eyes. And that's what this is doing. You know, in the future I would be able to share my view with somebody of my world. Not that I think anybody would be interested in doing that, but you know what I mean, Pascal. And then the last one, this comes back to what you were saying before about Meta and their ethical background and their ethical standards. They're going to need a hell of a lot more data from us to make all of this work. You know, a lot more data than even now. I mean, if you think about it, we give these companies a lot of our information already, but in order to create these avatars, in order to create these interactive environments, they are going to need a lot more data. And so the fourth patent, perhaps is part of what we were talking about in the news, is how they can make sure that all of this is safe for the consumer and the privacy is effectively protected. So that's it. It was a very short and sharp article, but I was really just attracted to it because of the relevance of the film that we're going to talk about later. And of course, the fact that pretty much every article you read today is about the metaverse.
No, thank you for taking the time to research and summarize that, because we need to know, we need to have a watching brief, all of us, about the metaverse, but we shouldn't rush headlong at the expense of existing strategies and also one that are in progress. And I find that to be a challenge, you know, for the work that you and I do as consultants and trainers, where we begin the work with the client, we get to the point of the strategy, we get to the point of implementation, and then the new shiny object comes along and they get distracted. And that expression I've used many times before, be careful of the marketing of marketing. And I think the metaverse is getting its fair share of PR, and hopefully it's going to settle. Now, for the second time, I think, by pure accident, we've chosen the same format, an article, and the same platform, Inc.com. Now, this article kind of found me because I use Flipboard, as you know, as a news gathering app. And it's written by a gentleman called Jeffrey James. And if you go on this official website, his biography has 3 words: author, columnist, and bon vivant, which I think is great. Is a professional speaker and consultant specializing in strategies for marketing and sales. Is the author of several books, including, I think you're going to appreciate the titles, Roger, Business Without the Bullshit, and How to Say It, B2B Selling. So I think it's somebody that, you know, we're going to enjoy finding out more about. And the kind of short article has a title of Science Just Discovered Your Brain Really Hates PowerPoint. And I have to confess, because I don't hate PowerPoint and I'd like to think that I use it well, I was kind of, oh, okay, let's have a look at this. And what the article does is 2 things. It's a great example of how to write an article, but also to use it to link to previously created content. And that's something that I am not good at. You know, I don't do the kind of linking back to additional resources and so on. So what is interesting is an article you could read very, very swiftly, but by clicking on the links, you end up reading more about the same subject and find yourself really, really well informed. But I'm going to play by the rules, Roger. I'm going to stick to the one article, not the content behind the links. And this is all to do with this idea of PowerPoint-style presentations, according to Jeffrey, will force you to multitask in a way that your brain can't really handle. Now, what is the science? And according to him, a psychologist from the University of Pittsburgh has been looking into it. It's called Mark Kutanch, and it's probably part of many who've looked into this. And what he's confirming, things that you and I and many business leaders out there have gathered, which is that the regions of the brain that is processing sound, the written word, and also the meaning of those words and the meaning of those full sentences, the regions are actually not 3, 4, 5 different regions. It's the same region of the brain doing all that hard work, which is why it's not really possible to sustain this idea of listening, reading, comprehending, and so on and so forth. And even though it is, you can have some sympathy for people believing that if I speak and the word that I've just said are also on screen, it will support comprehension and retention. Actually, it does the opposite. And what Jeffrey is saying is that the vast majority of PowerPoint and similar software presentation just make that mistake. We have seen that a lot. Well, everybody's seen that a lot over the last 2 years with the pandemic and watching webinars and having to endure essentially someone just publishing a document online and go through that document. So what Jeffrey is doing is offering some alternatives, but it's all based to something that you actually recommend a lot, is understand the goal of that presentation. What is the outcome beyond just talking at an audience? So if the goal is to discuss and decide, then maybe you should use a briefing document instead of a presentation. And I suspect that Jeffrey recommended a printed document that people can scribble, doodle. And what he was also saying is don't bother sending it in advance of the meeting. No one's going to read it. So distribute the briefing document at the meeting, give people time to read. Maybe they can split into small groups, discuss it, and then get the feedback. But if you want a decision, and I learned that the hard way, by the way, Roger, in my days of briefing boards of directors, just a brief document is better. Now, if you want to teach and train an audience, then look at creating an interactive experience. You and I know this, especially note-taking. This is a part of multitasking that we do much, much better. And finally, if you want to entertain or inspire, give a speech. And all these can be done with or without PowerPoint. But then point is, you shouldn't have the words. You shouldn't have the words that you're sharing. And I'm just going to close on a story that takes me back some years where I was helping a young marketing officer present to the directors. And that person was extremely nervous. And as a result to which, the presentation was so full of words. And I said, you need to remove those words. You mean keep one phrase or summarize everything with an image, with an icon. You need to kind of get to the point. And she said to me, but what if I forget what I'm about to say? And I said, well, then you need to practice a lot more, or you need to have a different system, or you need to actually reflect whether the way you've structured your story is supporting your own retention of the information. But I said, I can guarantee you, people will be either so busy looking at the screen, they won't listen to you, or vice versa. They look away because the words are just too much for them. So again, a very short article, a good example of how to write a column, and some great practical reminders as well for everybody out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely spot on, Pascal. I mean, I don't hate PowerPoint. Like you, I don't hate PowerPoint. But what I do hate is people who do presentations where the slides are effectively, full of words, like heading, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And worse, when they actually stand there and turn their back on the audience and effectively read the slides out. I mean, that's just dreadful. I try very hard to make sure that I use just photographs in my PowerPoint slides, maybe the odd word to back up this talk that I'm going. But it's very interesting to hear that this creates this imbalance in the brain because of the multitasking nature of what you're making people do. And if that means that they don't retain what you want them to learn, then genuinely you do have to revisit how you actually present.
Completely. And for me, there was obviously feedback from the audience. I had to unlearn the kind of text-heavy PowerPoint. But there was also two events. One, I got my course content stolen by somebody else. So I thought, well, I'll stop writing anything. It'd just be images. But also, I had to, particularly when I was doing social media marketing training, I had to be very flexible and sometimes change on the spot or skip, modules. And I didn't want to be tied to the words on the screen. So like you, it became so image heavy to the point where people would say to me, will we get a copy of the slides at the end of the session? Usual question. I said, well, tell you what, wait until the end and ask me again. And they come back and say, no, that's okay. Because they were hoping for almost like a workbook. And actually, maybe that should be the companion to your slides. Well, PowerPoint being obviously a technical solution, let's move on to marketing tech and apps. So, Roger, what have you found that could make life easier for all of us as content marketers?
Well, this week, Pascal, one of my clients actually asked me, can you recommend the best webcam? Which is actually something that I don't really think about that often. So I decided to do a little bit of research because, of course, sitting on top of my PC here is my good old favorite Logitech C922, which is a really good webcam. It can transmit in 1080p. It can go up to 30 frames per second. So, it's a good, crisp image. But I thought, what else is out there? And I came across, as you do at this time of year, at the beginning of the year, people are doing top 10s of tech, top 10s of apps, top 10s of platforms. And I found quite a few articles which were, here are the top 10 webcams. And I'm going to do the top 3 rather than doing the usual with choosing 2, because I want to make a point by including the third one. So the first one is called the Razer Kiyo Pro. And from reading about it, the reason that this one is, according to this article, the absolute best on the market at the moment is because it will do 60 frames per second, which is quite high, but actually favored by people who do live streaming for games. The second one is the Elgato Facecam, and this one is very good for streaming, apparently, especially if you're streaming live, and again, doing it to games platforms, or you might be doing it to LinkedIn Live or something like that. And then the third one, which they do say is the best overall, is the Logitech C920. Now, I mentioned before that I have a 922. I've never really known what the difference is. Maybe it's the UK version is the 922 and the American version is the 920. But they are saying that Logitech C920 is still the best all-rounder webcam that you can buy. And here's the interesting thing, going back to what you said in the news section, this webcam is now nearly 10 years old. And it is still regarded as one of the best, if not the best, all-round webcams. Now, I actually find that quite remarkable, given that we've lived through 2 years where pretty much webcams have become the most must-have item of anything that we own from a technology point of view. And yet, nobody has developed a webcam yet which can be considered to be better than one that is already 10 years old.
It's fascinating. Back to your point, there are times in the year where you can't get hold of the webcam or microphones, and they go through supply issues. I remember when it all began, nearly 2 years ago for us in the UK, and like you, my customer was asking me for recommendations for working from home, webcams and microphones, and I would sometimes do like a virtual studio setup. I would guide them through Zoom calls and so on. So I would send them links on Amazon. They would come back within a moment saying, it's not available, it's out of stock. And I went on for quite some time. So, but thanks for that. It's a great little shortlist. And I know you're going to share the links in the show notes as well. So that's excellent. But for me, very much like you, the sections today are the result of a conversation with the client. They were asking me to just check what I thought of their social media planner, as in they were looking at the next few weeks and few months. And they sent me an Excel document. And if you are listening to this podcast, my dear client, please don't understand. I'm not, really attacking you, but a moment ago we talked about PowerPoint and how people can sometimes have a negative reaction. I'm a bit the same with Excel, because when I opened the document, all I saw was just this kind of barrage of boxes full of words and date and numbers and so on. And sometimes there was an attempt at putting some colors, but it was just incomprehensible. And I had to really sit down and study and sometimes click on the box to be able to read the full text and so on. And my reaction was, this is not inspiring. It can't be inspiring for the people having to implement the plan. and certainly it's not inspiring for me. So I did a bit of research because I think what you need, and you certainly perhaps need this version for the minutiae, but you need that kind of overview statement. And I think that statement should be visual. And I'm thinking of a graphic maybe with boxes numbered 1 till 31 and a keyword or an image that is very symbolic that the team understands. So 2 options for you to work out a better planner. Now, to begin with all the planners, you will need probably for your post on social media to be visuals, to be perhaps photos or videos. And Pexels, that has been mentioned on Marketing Tech and Apps before, this resource for copyright-free videos and photos, have launched their 2022 Pexels content calendar. Now, the way it works, following the hyperlink in the show notes, you click on there and you've got the month of the year that has been split. And if you click on a particular month, such as February or March, you will see the international days, today being the International Day for Data Privacy. So if you click on the particular month or day of that month, it will take you automatically to a selection organized by the Pexels team of the best photos and videos that can help you craft a post relevant to that particular theme. So that can help you with the visuals. But then to get a sign off, or maybe to kind of support the team, understand what your plans are and not send an Excel spreadsheet, then I came across a company called 24slides.com. Yet another one that I didn't know about that is there to help you with PowerPoint templates of all things and Google Slides. And I came across, and the link is in the show notes, a visual social media planner. Literally, as I mentioned a moment ago, on one view, you have the days of the month, and inside the boxes, the information you'll need to understand what you have in mind. But it's a very visual experience. And then maybe indeed the next page could be your Excel spreadsheet. So 24slides.com, social media content planner, is a link. I've also put a link to all the other free templates, and there are many indeed, and you can also go for their chargeable service. So hopefully that will make your planning more enjoyable, just more engaging for the team and your seniors, and you can just make sure that you don't just rely on Excel all the time.
No, this is great, Pascal. I mean, it's a bit like me talking about Gantt charts last week.
Yes.
I know about the importance of planning, and we all do, but it's not my favorite job in the world. So something like this, which makes it easier and is more visual for people like me, again, I recoil from Excel spreadsheets because they were so obviously designed for people who are, accountancy based or numerically superior, and something visual like this is always going to help. So those are great finds.
Thank you very much. But as we said before, none of this would be possible without the vision and hard work of pioneers and visionaries of the recent and distant past. Let's move on to This Week in History.
In 1928, John Logie Baird sends a TV image across the Atlantic using shortwave radio from Purley, England to Hartsdale, New York. This caused a sensation, and the New York Times compared the event to Marconi sending the letter S by radio across the Atlantic 27 years earlier.
Wow, well, in 1994, thieves broke into the National Gallery in Oslo and stole the Scream, later recovered, one of the several versions Norwegian artist Edvard Munch made of his most famous painting.
In 1996, after 3 hours, world chess champion Garry Kasparov loses the first game of a 6-game match against Deep Blue, the IBM computer capable of evaluating 200 million moves per second.
Well, a year later, in 1997, The Simpsons becomes the longest-running animated series in cartoon history, with the airing of episode 167, 8 years after its premiere on the Fox network. And in 2018, The Simpsons surpasses the 635-episode count of Gunsmoke, becoming the longest-running sitcom in TV history.
Wow, that's incredible.
I mean, I've stopped watching The Simpsons quite some years ago. But when I was watching, I was enjoying it. I just can't even get my head around the storytelling and the story creation by the time this episode of Two Geeks comes out, they'd be probably reaching 650. That's a lot of episodes, isn't it?
And the fact that they're all animated as well is, it's not just actors. They're having to do I don't know whether it's computer generated animation or whether they're still doing it frame by frame, but it's an incredible undertaking, and the detail as well is pretty special as well, isn't it? There's always stuff going on in the background in Simpsons episodes.
And I mean, literally, movie stars, singers, artists, they just can't wait to make an appearance, albeit voice appearance, in The Simpsons. Some of them have been kind of recurring characters.
Yeah.
It's just, a wonderful, actually, kind of addition to This Week in History, because I'm just completely astounded by the achievement. Something that is actually very simple. I mean, you could argue the artwork is very simplistic. It's not changed much over the years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's pretty much the same visuals, isn't it? Yellow people, and it's a definitely a unique style, isn't it? Quite a lot of the characters don't look attractive. They're deliberately drawn that way.
Yeah, and they've not aged at all as well in
No.
all these years that they've been running the Simpsons. But yeah, it's just absolutely remarkable. There's countless memes on social media about the Simpsons. I think it's probably known well. I've not checked, but I'd imagine it might exist as well in different languages. So there's been some dubbing in different languages, because the stories are very universal. The characters are very likable.
Absolutely right. So I was very interested by this piece of history about the chess computer and Garry Kasparov being beaten by Deep Blue, the IBM computer. I have a memory of being at school, and there was a chess club run by Dr. Matthews. We used to call him Diddy Matthews because he was a really small guy, and that's probably very politically incorrect, isn't it? And he used to run this chess club, and he bought, or the school bought, a very early chess computer, and it became a really, really almost must have. And people used to book this thing weeks in advance at lunchtime so that they could go and play on this chess computer. And I remember it actually just looked like a board, but it was quite a lot thicker because all the circuitry was underneath. And it was really hard to beat this thing, even on the easy setting. And I remember booking myself in for a couple of weeks in advance, and it was getting, I've got a week to go until I get the chess computer. I was thinking, how weird to be so excited about getting to play with a chess computer. Now I can download a chess app on my phone and play chess against a computer now, and guess what? They're still quite hard to beat.
What is interesting is, back to science fiction, humanity has always been concerned about machines taking over. 96, that's a few years after Terminator 2, if you think about it. Now, I do know that Garry Kasparov had won in previous years, and then eventually he lost against Deep Blue because, again, of its computing power. Now, claim to fame, when we had a computer at home and we had a chess game, because usually when you bought a computer, you had also kind of simple games. We even had a rip-off version of Hopper, the frog that would go across traffic and so on. And I won against the computer by using this particular tactic. I would just mimic its moves. So I would allow the computer to do, to start, and I would just mimic its every single move. And eventually the computer would give up, which I thought was interesting. So here it is. And whilst people may be impressed, I did that because I didn't know how to play chess. That's why I did. So I just copied every single move like a mirror image, and eventually the computer was just cornered. It just didn't know what to do because there was perhaps no other scenarios for it.
This chess is a strange game, isn't it? I sort of fall in and out of love with it. It's so iconic. I mean, I always remember that the beginning of the film From Russia with Love, there's a scene where the one of the Spectre agents is in a chess tournament, and of course they're sat on a table in the middle of the room, and there's a whole audience of people watching them play, and then in the background there's some guys moving the pieces on the big board so that they can actually see what's happening. And there's just something iconic about chess that it brings that feeling to a film or to a piece of content. It's just great.
Yeah, I'll tell you on the watch list, which is getting longer every passing week. There's a series, am I right? Queen's Gambit.
Yes,
is around. Have you seen it?
Oh, it is absolutely phenomenal, Pascal. It is. We watched it over maybe 2 or 3 nights. It's so compelling. When you actually think about it, the world went absolutely mad for a series which is about a girl playing chess. I mean, if you put that up and said to people, do you want to watch a series about a girl playing chess? Most people think, oh, that sounds really dull and boring, but it is absolutely superb. So definitely move it further up your list.
Thank you very much. Right, let's get back into the present with our creator shout-outs. So, Roger, who is in the spotlight this week?
My content creator shout out is for a lady called 𝗓𝗄𝗃. She is the CEO at the Cambridge Marketing College. Now, I came across Kieran recently because she very kindly invited me to appear on her Cambridge Marketing podcast. And ironically, given what we've been talking about in the show today, she specifically asked me to go on to talk about how to improve presentations in an online environment. And naturally, we talked about the use or misuse of PowerPoint. So how coincidental is that? And I listened to quite a few episodes of the Cambridge Marketing Podcast as a result of being invited to go on. And Kieran's a great host, a very calming voice, and a very interesting interviewer, and I really enjoyed the experience of being on the show, but I've also really enjoyed listening to the other episodes. And I may have said this a few times, I've sort of got a bit fed up with some of the more what I would describe as shouty podcasts that there are out there. And I know sometimes I get a bit animated, and I'm probably guilty of shouting a little bit in my podcast as well. But sometimes it just, you think, oh, for goodness sake, just settle down, calm down, and let's just talk about this objectively and calmly and naturally, and Kieran has that ability to do that in the podcast that she's hosting. So check it out. I have to say, before I was invited on the show, I hadn't heard of it. Now I do, and that's why it's getting a shout out. So 𝗓𝗄𝗃 and the Cambridge Marketing Podcast.
Oh, super. Well, for me, I'm very fond of new beginnings. Big fan of giving new creators, new business a shout out. So this is about Alex Reed. Alex Reed is the co-founder of 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗃, just being launched very recently. 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗃 is an organization soon to become a tool providing you with all the features you need as a new business to find investors, find co-founders, find kind of financing and online solutions to get stuff done. And he has started writing, which I think is also a format that we sometimes need to give more of a shout out in writing for the web. He's become the author of a new blog series called Founder Stories. So really to inspire others to start their own venture. He's going to be looking almost like an investigator, like a journalist, at the story of a famous brand. And his very first article is about the founder of Patagonia, the very, very famous brand, Yvon Chouinard. And I just think it's amazing. I know this is only article number 1 of a very long series. I know this is a very brand new business, but these individuals like Alex should also be part of creator shout-outs. I'm just so pleased to be able to give him, a big salute and congratulations with starting the business, the blog, and very best of luck.
Fantastic, and I shall back you up in that wishing of the luck there, Pascal. And listening to stories about founders and how they build businesses is such an important way to strategize, isn't it? Because you learn from the mistakes that they've made, you can learn from the success that they've had. So I always enjoy having a look at stories of people who started businesses.
Absolutely. Now, I am not a precog, Roger, but I can certainly predetermine that we're going to have a blast in film marketing. Now, incredibly, Roger, this year is the 20th anniversary of Minority Report, a movie about predicting the future, about predicting whether individuals are going to be behaving a particular way, and a movie about the future of marketing. Let's watch the trailer again.
Look at me. Positive for Howard Marks. I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin that was take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours and 4 minutes. No.
Don't run. Everybody runs, Fletch.
Wow. So you said during the introduction that you watched Minority Report recently. I watched it about 2 months ago, I think.
Yeah, we watched it last night.
Wow.
Trying to think about, I mean, we did originally own the DVD, and I did search through our pile of DVDs, but I couldn't find it. So I've either lost it, sold it, or lent it to somebody who's never given it me back. So we did have to go and find it online, and pay to watch it. But what an incredible film. I just forgotten how good it is. I mean, obviously directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Cruise. You know, those are two of the biggest movie heavyweights of all time. But I'd forgotten about the visual style of the film, you know, very sort of bright and silvery and almost washed out in certain aspects. Incredibly detailed plot. I mean, on the face of it, it's a police procedural, but it's a police procedural set in 2054. But the most fascinating thing about it is that there's all sorts of technologies which are introduced around advertising and around surveillance and around data and around privacy, which at the time were obviously just predictions that Steven Spielberg and the team were making about what the future might hold. But when you watch it again 20 years later, you're sitting there thinking, my goodness, so much of this has actually come true. So not only do you get an incredible film to watch purely from the entertainment point of view, but from a film marketing point of view, you get the double whammy, because not only can we talk about how they marketed the film to people, but within the film there's a whole narrative that we could talk about for hours about how marketing is developing and how technology might allow things to become even more intrusive than perhaps things are now.
Oh, I'm really pleased that you had such a blast watching it again. For us, it was one of those where we thought, what can we watch today? And I just said, I wouldn't mind watching Minority Report again, because it's such a complex story. And we mentioned, obviously, the marketing challenge of the producers, the financiers wanted a summer blockbuster for the family. But what it got really was a very, what I call, adult story. I mean, you talk about the look and feel of the movie, but the tone is dark. I mean, this is looking at, you know, child abduction. This is looking at, you know, the character played by Tom Cruise, literally with a broken down marriage, a drug user, but head of an agency that is using the power of the precogs to essentially accuse people of a murder they have not committed just yet, of everything that comes with it. And for me, I don't think it's been done again since also. I mean, there's been, you know, tons of sci-fi movies produced over the last 20 years, but one that is a real science fiction, which is about inviting you to ask questions, inviting you to think, well, what would I do in that situation? But also doing a fair job, as you mentioned, to predict where things are going. And the way in which Steven Spielberg has approached it by actually organizing a think tank summit to invite people from all different industries and sector in terms of what we're going to do about our future society. It is a really testament to their work as well as storytellers.
Yeah, and I think that was the key to it. They spent a lot of time trying to visualize what they thought the future would be like, but they didn't go so far off the wall. They kept it rooted in the reality of the time. So from 10 years ago, they just pushed it a little bit further out, didn't they? And therefore, what they came up with was something which was maybe a natural progression. And that's why it's so amazing to watch this film now and think, gosh, so much of this has sort of come true. I mean, you know, this was before the iPhone, this was before the Android phone, this was before mobile phones became big, I guess. But, you know, a lot of the technology that they were predicting looks like the phone technology that we have now, and I think that is that is remarkable, and that's why they were so clever in those think tanks. They didn't reimagine the world where we grow everything, or it was so super sci-fi. It was grounded in reality, and that's why it works.
Yeah, it wasn't space opera a la Star Trek or Star Wars.
Yeah.
But when you look at Minority Report, you have the driverless cars. We are making good inroads in that. You have the multitude of ways in which you could be targeted as a consumer. I mean, the scene that always makes me laugh, as one of my guilty pleasure, is when the character played by Tom Cruise, the head of the pre-crime unit, is at home eating some cornflakes, and then the box has an advert playing. It's so irritating that he throws the box across the room. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, anyone would do that. It's so annoying. So there was also that element of, it's clever, it's targeted, the way you could read your face, the way you could read your eyes, and then send you, or read out to you a personal message about buying the next bit of clothing or the next perfume. But that invasion and that intrusion, in the case of obviously his character John Anderton, to be able to sneak into places but to forever being recognized because of the surveillance is also very interesting.
And again, we in the UK particularly, we live in a surveillance-heavy society. There are CCTV cameras on pretty much every wall and every corner and every street. So we're not far off the reality of some of these predictions. And that scene of him walking down the street and being targeted by ads, we're not far off that again ourselves today. If you think about it, when we're online, the equivalent of his eyes being scanned by all of these sensors in order to target him with specific ads in the movie is our equivalent, I guess, of the cookie. So that's why we get targeted ads based upon our preferences when we go onto Facebook. I'll go and have a look at a website for a hotel resort in Barbados, say, and then lo and behold, the next time I go onto Facebook, there in the adverts bit is an advert for a hotel in Barbados. That's what's happening in this film, except it's based upon the eyes. The only difference between the prediction that this film made and where we are today is that we still need to go online to be targeted in the same way as Tom Cruise was in that film, whereas he actually physically walked down the street and was still targeted. So we're still a little bit away from that total intrusion, but you know what, Pascal? We will get there, and the metaverse will be part of this whole thing.
Absolutely. Just to close on the film itself and the production. So, I mean, people have praised the performance of Tom Cruise, Colin Farrell, and so on, but can we also just spend a moment on the character of Agatha, the main precog, played by Samantha Morton? What a performance.
Yeah, I mean, she's remarkable, and a UK actress, I think.
Correct.
She's very she's developed an incredibly good career, mainly on TV, I think, but she's been in some extremely iconic TV series over the years. So it's great to see her, in her early days in this movie.
You were talking about the look and feel of the film. What is fascinating is that if you can, all of you, if you don't have it, do buy the Blu-ray, because if you are interested in film production and creation, the extras are just brilliant. It goes on and on and on to the details. So what they did, Steven Spielberg was working with, let's say, an old school cinematographer, and they bypassed a bleaching process to clean up the film. So it wasn't actually like you do nowadays, where you would add something to a digital file. This is film. Yeah. And they just bypassed the bleaching process to just retain some element of essentially slightly silverish and give it that amazing coloration. And just final trivia, only because I'm a comedy movie nerd when it comes to Minority Report and Spielberg's work, as you know, the precog, the three. And I thought was interesting about the Minority Report is that juxtaposition between the tech and the precog, almost fragile kind of, let's call them creatures, but people, and being looked after very, very carefully. But the name they came up with, the precog, were all inspired by mystery writers, because this is a detective story, this is mystery, this is a murder mystery with some subsets in terms of the personal anguish of the main character. But Agatha was obviously Agatha Christie. We had also an Arthur for Arthur Conan Doyle, and right that I'm not aware of, a dash for Dashiell Hammett. All kind of writers around murder mystery. Let's talk about the marketing, and I kind of gave it away a bit. This challenge of the producers wanted another Spielberg blockbuster for the whole family to go to, but in fact, it was a adult movie because the dark story and the action is there, but there's not always a lot of action. It's really that story being delivered over the course of a couple of hours, and that makes it difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it was quite hard to do research on the actual marketing of this film. And from what I can gather, Pascal, they didn't really do a great deal. They relied purely on the two names, Spielberg and Cruise, and that they almost thought that was enough to draw the crowds, because Spielberg plus Cruise equals blockbuster. It's
Yeah.
almost like an equation of the film industry, isn't it? And that's why Cruise Spielberg was the focus of the posters, many different posters, and the trailer that we enjoyed a few moments ago. Now, the taglines, there was I don't think I've ever seen as many taglines for a film before. But what would you do if you were accused of a murder you had not committed yet? Everybody runs. The system is perfect until it comes after you. Get ready to run. And there was at least 10 more, which I haven't written down here. And I think that was enough to make the film attractive to the audience. And maybe the family did think that they were going to see a summer blockbuster, and maybe some of them might have been a bit freaked out by what they actually saw and how dark it actually turned out to be. But it's still a very entertaining film at the heart of it.
It is, and so we start with the media coverage. There was three hooks almost for this film. One was the achievement from the technical point of view and look and feel, as you've mentioned. Then there was this almost kind of rejoicing in the future tech. Look, what life would look like thanks to Spielberg and his colleagues. And then the third hook, which I thought was really interesting, was whether or not this is going too far. And what is interesting is even today there would be people writing articles looking at whether or not the prediction made by Spielberg and his production team were indeed correct. So this is a movie that people talk about over and over again. The video clip of Tom Cruise going through the shopping mall is played all the time at conferences and webinars and so on. And I'm not criticizing, because I think it's so riveting and so rich in kind of reactions and storytelling. So there was different ways which they could talk about the film. But just to show you how harsh Hollywood is, when it was time for to do the press junket, so go around the world, different festivals. We were lucky in the UK. We had a premiere of Minority Report with Tom Cruise there to salute the fans and do a number of things. There was one thing that they did say to Spielberg, "No, that's okay. You don't have to go." And when Spielberg asked why, he said, "Well, AI didn't really work, did it? So now we'll send Tom, but you can stay home." And that's just like, this is Steven Spielberg we are talking about. But this is how harsh, the financiers and producers can be about their decision making. There was one kind of story that made the news in the US, which was around this idea of surveillance. This idea of you said the UK has got the gold medal in terms of the number of CCTV cameras. So when people went to the premiere in the US, they were being tracked by cameras everywhere, and they could check what footage was being told. So that allowed people to talk about it. But that was before social media, so all you could do is get that covered by press, radio, and TV.
Yeah, and do you know what? One of the things that really stands out in this film, and you can't help but notice it, is the product placement is absolutely off the scale. I mean, you mentioned Gap already. Walking into Gap and the computer generated image comes up and says, "Hey, how did you enjoy the top you bought 6 months ago?" Blah blah blah. Again, highlighting the intrusive nature of adverts. And you know what I always say: engage, don't enrage. But a lot of the adverts that these people are being subjected to in the film are enraging. I would be driven completely mad by them. But what I didn't know, Pascal, is that Spielberg effectively almost pioneered brand promotions in movies going right back to E.T. when he was featuring Reese's Pieces, which were sweets. But in this film, there's at least 15, probably more, massive brands which get product placement. Gap, I've already mentioned, Burger King, Lexus, Nokia, Pepsi, they're all in there. And apparently, this contributed nearly a quarter of the whole of the budget of the film was derived from those product placements.
Yeah, and talking about budget, once again, the way in which a movie can be talked about, people were talking about Spielberg and Tom Cruise actually declining getting payment or a fee for making the film. Instead, they wanted a percentage of the profit, 15% each, and that it almost became that infamous 30% of the money going towards Spielberg and Cruise instead of a fee. And I think that was probably a very wise decision, because that movie at the time, both in terms of cinema but also DVD and Blu-ray, did make a lot of money.
Yeah, and so I think the lessons for me from watching this film again almost reaffirms my belief that a lot of marketing that we see today is intrusive and annoying. Those pop-ups that cover over what you're trying to read on a website, that's the equivalent of walking down the street and having an advert shouting your name. It's as bad as that. And as marketers, I've always said it's a real privilege we have to communicate with our customers and to tell our customers how we can help them with our products, but we shouldn't abuse that privilege. And it's 20 years old, but this film still makes some extremely important lessons for marketers like you and I. And I guess the one thing that I just wanted to finish my opinions on is that whole idea again of having a think tank, thinking about the way things may turn out, but remembering to ground it in reality. And I think Steven Spielberg actually said at the start of those think tanks, I wanted all the toys to come true someday. And think about how many of them effectively have come true. That's visionary. That is visionary.
Visionary. For me, there's two standout scenes in Minority Report in terms of I want this. The bit where he's accessing data using augmented reality. So he's wearing those gloves and he's just having this great physical expression. I love the scene. I think he must have studied or been trained. It's almost like yoga-like or tai chi-like, where he's moving his hands, moving his arms, and accessing information to predict a crime, and then to get him and his colleagues as part of the pre-crime unit to go out. So that's, for me, I just love watching it. The other one, which is more watching it whilst hiding my face behind my fingers, is when he goes through the operation to change his eyes so that he can go through, infiltrate the particular building without being recognized. And it's just horrible to watch. And of course, just to build the pressure the way Spielberg knows how to, that's when they send the drones to those little spiders to look for him.
Yeah, I mean, that scene, I remember Trisha said last night, I couldn't watch this at the cinema 20 years ago and I can't watch it again tonight. It's a really harrowing scene. But I mean, again, those little spiders, absolutely incredible. And that is such a tense scene. And yet those animated spiders are so small, and yet they create so much menace. It's brilliant storytelling.
Absolutely. We could go on for quite some time talking about Minority Report and so on, but we must find a way to bring this episode of Two Geeks Marketing Podcast to an end. So thank you so much for listening and watching episode 66. Until the next one, go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. He was Roger Edwards and I was Pascal Fintoni. Bye for now.